Initially it was personal interest. My father's father was a stretcher bearer in the trenches when he was 15. What attracted us with this project was that it gave us a chance to think about it in a broader context, to think about it figuratively, depicting it with drawings of people and places. This piece of history, this huge number of Gospels that were distributed, I had no idea about that story. So I had to think about my perspective on it as an artist, and it was very much focusing on the legacy. There's people, we can't forget this war. We were given 4 verses to respond to. One of them was, "Greater love hath no man than he lay down his life for his friends." I think people find that inappropriate sometimes, that it sort of seems to glorify war. But when it came down to it, there were so many instances of people looking after each other. And they fought for their friends, they fought for their pals, and they were in pal regiments. There were too many 30-year-olds in most dramatisations of the First World War, when so many of them were so young, like my grandfather. So he had a young person coming out of a building in the East End to meet 2 of his pals, whose faces are obscured by their dress uniform. So you see his identity, the other one's identities are blocked out by the composition, so sort of hinting at that loss. Another image we've done, we were drawn to the stories as well about the watchman or night watch. So we drew some parallels between paintings of hermits, of them praying in the desert. We were interested in the fact that the trench itself, the structure, is based around the human body, but kind of stretching off into infinity. There's a sump at the bottom with duckboards in it, which is a foot high. And then there's a fire step, which is the length of a shin. And then there's another increment, the height of the hip, and then it leans out with the sandbags. That parallel between the human body and the trench, we were bringing that out as well. That person in isolation, vulnerable at that moment. Then we have another image of these things called Cody kites that were invented by Wild West showmen. And they have 5 kites in a row, and one would be lifted up and then another one. It would lift a man into the air to observe enemy lines and to sight artillery and things like that. And this image of vulnerability, but also slightly crazy image of trying to lift a man into the air with a kite, that kind of summed up a lot of the ironies of that period, and also the kind of overreaching of human beings sometimes. For us, that kind of twinned well with this idea of almost like eternal life lifting someone off the ground. It sort of hints at spiritual themes as well. And the final image we've come up with was a sailor before embarkation, standing in front of a ship. Modernist painters were actually employed to design camouflage for these battleships. So there was enormous, heavy modernist works of art sailing the ocean. So there's a direct link between art and camouflage in the First World War. I wanted to explore that, and also the aspect of camouflage hinting at deception. So we have the sailor there thinking about these words that have been written for his preservation, but he's been brought there by words and deception, which is sort of hinted at by his surroundings. All of the images have an individual in a moment of stress or anxiety, a moment when the words that were written down for them in these Gospels would have been of consolation to them. Although some people used religious ideas to drum up support for the war, this was a really good example of the Bible being used to give consolation to people in a particularly terrible circumstance. What I like about the general approach of Lifewords, that you didn't attach any particular agenda to the words. You had the confidence to put them out. You made them available in a context that could be picked up and looked at. It was just a matter of putting the words themselves at people's disposal to think about and to consider.